Answer: General Studies Mains Mock Test 1053 2018. Answer all the questions in not more than 200 words each. Content of the answers is more important than its length. All questions carry equal marks. 12.5 × 20 = 251. What are the grounds for disqualification of members of legislatures under the 10th Schedule of Indian Constitution? Analyze the merits and demerits of having such provisions in a parliamentary democracy like India. Approach. In the introduction, briefly describe and write about the 10th Schedule. Mention the ground for disqualification provided under the 10th Schedule of Indian Constitution. Enumerate the merits and demerits of anti-defection law and give arguments for and against these provisions. Suggest the way forward in the conclusion. Answer. The 10th Schedule, which is popularly known as the Anti-Defection Law, was added to the Constitution through the 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act, 1985. The law provides the following grounds for disqualification. Member of Parliament or state legislature belonging to a political party is deemed to have defected if O. He either voluntarily resigns or gives up the membership of his political party, or O. He disobeys the directives of the party leadership on a vote or abstains from voting without taking prior permission within 15 days from such voting or abstention. An independent candidate joins the party after the election. The nominated member joins the party 6 months after becoming an MP/MLA. Over a period of time, the anti-defection law has been exposed to different situations, which have highlighted both its merits and demerits. Merits. It seeks to protect and provide stability in the government by disqualifying defecting legislators. It promotes discipline in the party and ensures that members elected with party support, and on the basis of party manifestos, remain loyal to the party policies. Defection amounts to breach of trust of people, and the anti-defection law safeguards this trust. Demerits. The Act reduces the accountability of the government to the Parliament and the people by preventing members of the House from changing the party. It restrains the basic freedom of speech and expression of the parliamentarians and reduces them from thinking lawmakers to mere numbers required for passing the bill. The decision of presiding officer P.O.S. fine has also been problematic in the past. However, in the Kidhodo-Holohan versus Zakilhu case, the Supreme Court held that the decision of P.O. is subject to judicial review. Thus, the need of the hour is to strengthen the law by creating mechanisms for greater inter-party democracy, limiting the usage of whips and referring the anti-defection cases to President/Governor. Also, we need to create a disincentive for political parties from accepting defecting legislators in their fold. 2. The legislature must use the power to punish for contempt or breach of privilege sparingly, invoking it mainly to protect the independence of the House and not to take away the liberty of critics. Discuss. In this context, analyze the need for codification of privileges. Approach. In introduction, briefly mention the provisions of the Constitution to protect the independence of the legislature. Discuss the arguments for and against the privileges of the legislature. Mention the reasons why the privileges must be codified and key recommendations of different committees. Conclude with a precautionary note on codification. Answer. The Constitution of India, under Articles 105 and 194, provide for powers, privileges, etc. to the Parliament and the state legislatures and their members. In the absence of codification, these rights and immunities continue to be governed largely by the British parliamentary conventions as was originally provided by the Constitution makers. The idea behind these privileges is to protect freedom of speech and expression in the Houses and to shield from undue influence or pressure of external factors such as the media. These also save the members/participants in the legislature from judicial scrutiny WRT anything said or any vote given or other proceedings in the House. However, over a period of time, the power to punish for contempt or breach of privilege has been criticized for overstepping the liberty of critics, essentially the civil society and the media. Following that are to be noted in this regard. It is invoked for the ostensible reason of protecting the image of the House on the whole or its individual members. Dozens of people are summoned every year before the Privileges Committees on charges of breach of privilege of legislators. It is sometimes used to counter media criticism of legislators. For example, recently Karnataka Assembly imposed fines and imprisonment onto journalists for writing against the Speaker when he was a legislator. While privileges provide absolute freedom of speech in the Houses, the common man has comparatively restricted freedom of speech. Need for codification of privileges. Given above, the need of the hour is to clearly delimit and define parliamentary privileges in order to balance these with the fundamental rights, remove their vagueness, uncertainty and inscrutability, address conflict of interest as the parliamentarians become judges in their own case violating principle of fair trial, prevent their misuse to hide misdeeds of corruption, e.g. in P.V. Narciso versus CBI 1998 case. The SC held that bribe takers who voted against the no confidence motion were immune from prosecution due to their privileges. The National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution, the First and Second Press Commissions and the Press Council of India in their reports have argued for codification of these privileges. Simultaneously, there should be scope for future adjustments and sovereignty of the Parliament must be ensured. 3. Discuss the need for the doctrine of pith and substance in the Indian context. Also enumerate the circumstances under which legislative power of the Union can be extended over state subjects. Approach. First explain the basic concept of the doctrine of pith and substance. Then discuss the need for this doctrine in the Indian context. Finally, enumerate the circumstances under which legislative power of the Union can be extended over state subjects. Answer. Pith means essence of something and substance means the most important or essential part of something. Doctrine of pith and substance is a legal doctrine which helps to determine under which head or authority of power or field of given matter of legislation falls. In Indian context, it helps the courts to look into the substance of the matter to ascertain under which of the 3 lists of the 7th schedule a particular law falls. The doctrine provides a degree of flexibility in the otherwise rigid scheme of distribution of legislative powers as given under Article 246. In order to determine whether a particular enactment falls under one list or the other, the need is to find the pith and substance of such enactment and not its legislative label. Need of the doctrine. If the encroachment substantially falls under an entry over which the legislature has jurisdiction, an incidental encroachment upon another entry over which it had no competence will not invalidate the law. In the absence of this doctrine, the powers of the legislature would be drastically circumscribed. Therefore, it helps the courts to decide the federal disputes of legislative character among the states and the Union. Circumstances when the Union can enact law on subjects in the state list. Article 249, the Parliament can make law on a subject included in the state list, if the Regia Sepa declares by a resolution of 2/3 of its members present and voting, that it is necessary in the national interest that Parliament shall have power to legislate over such matter. Each such resolution will give a lease of 1 year to the law in question. Article 250. During proclamation of emergency, Parliament shall have similar power to legislate with respect to the state subjects. Article 252. If the legislatures of 2 or more states resolve that it shall be lawful for the Parliament to make laws wrt any matters included in the state list relating to those states, the Parliament shall have such power as regards such states. Article 253. Parliament shall have the power to legislate wrt any subject for purpose of implementing treaties or international agreements and conventions. Article 356. Under a presidential proclamation, a failure of the constitutional machinery in a state, the president may declare that the powers of the legislature of the states shall be exercisable by or under the authority of Parliament. Thus, Indian polity has a unique blend of federal and unitary mechanisms to deal with the situation as it emerges. 4. What are the challenges in implementing the Supreme Court order regarding setting up of fast-track courts to deal with cases of tainted legislators? Examine whether such a move can be an effective strategy to deal with the problem of criminalization of politics. Approach. Give a brief account of the proposed scheme of fast-track courts to deal with cases of tainted legislators. State the challenges in implementing the Supreme Court order of establishing the courts. Assess whether it is an effective strategy to deal with the problem of criminalization of politics. Answer. Following the Supreme Court's directive to set up special courts to exclusively try lawmakers, i.e. MPs and MLAs, and decide the cases expeditiously, the central government framed a scheme to set up 12 fast-track courts, for a period of 1 year, to fast-track the cases pending against lawmakers. Challenges to the fast-track courts. Thought the SC gave a go-ahead. It also stated that the center's scheme at a given stage is rudimentary and a tentative measure, which needs to be modified as per situations in the future. The setting of fast-track courts would face the following problems. Existing burden due to pending cases, with approximately over 3 crore cases pending in courts across India, with more than 40 law cases pending in the High Courts and Supreme Court. The fast-track courts will put further pressure if cases are not disposed of in stipulated time. Past experience with fast-track courts. Already existing fast-track courts are not able to complete cases in a time-bound manner due to budgetary constraints and lack of adequate staff. Judicial vacancies. Before setting up new courts, the problem of vacancies at all tiers of courts needs to be tackled. Lack of public prosecutors. There have been instances when a prosecutor has 2 or more cases being listed at the same time but in different courts. More public prosecutors need to be appointed. Additional finances. The courts will put demand on the public exchequer and will also be dependent on the availability of finances with the states. Consolidation and coordination issues. As per the scheme, one fast-track court will have jurisdiction over cases pending in several states, which is difficult to coordinate. Nevertheless, the move can be effective to deal with the problem of criminalization of politics due to the following reasons. It may help plumb the loopholes in the legal system that allow politicians to opt for frequent adjournment or try to delay legal proceedings. It will help in faster disposal of cases against tainted legislators in a time-bound manner. It will usher in a sense of urgency to resolve cases involving MPs and MLAs to represent citizens of the country and frame policies for them, thus serving the public interest. The Election Commission has also supported the idea, stating that the move will go a long way in cleansing Indian politics. To ensure the success of the proposed scheme, it is necessary that the institutions of judiciary cooperate and coordinate effectively, coupled with effective investigation. This will surely be a step forward towards decriminalization of politics. 5. Review of performance should be a key factor in revising compensation. In this context, critically discuss the practice of appointing pay commissions every 10 years to suggest salary revisions for government staff. Approach. Briefly describe pay commissions. Give the reason for review of compensation as per performance. Building on the above, discuss downsides of pay commissions. Suggest a way forward and conclude. Answer. The Central Pay Commission (CPC) and also state pay commissions is set up on a periodic basis by the government to review and recommend changes in the salary and pension structures of its employees in various civil and military divisions. Since independence, 7 such CPCs have been constituted, with the latest, i.e. 7th Pay Commission's recommendations being accepted in 2016. An expectation for a just reward is naturally ingrained in every human action. The reward should be commensurate to the efforts in order to incentivize the risk-takers, innovators, high performers, and discipline the laggards. Thus, review of performance should be a key factor in revising compensation. Under the present system, the CPC recommends across-the-board pay hike, which has little scope to account in the performance. Other concerning issues. Years subsequent to the implementation of CPC's recommendations become fiscally stressful for the center and states. For e.g. in 2009 to 10, the fiscal deficit exceeded 6% post-6th CPC's implementation. Most recently, due to the 7th CPC, additional payout accounted for nearly 0.65% of GDP in 517. The recommendations are liable to be influenced by the biasness of its members. For e.g. in 2014, a few retired officers challenged the appointment of an IAS officer in the 7th CPC in the Delhi High Court. Appointment, implementation, or timing of the CPC can be potentially politicized and can cause disruptions. In this context, the following changes are desirable. Development of a risk-reward-led annual compensation system. Security of tenure to employees so as to reasonably assess his/her performance. Currently, frequent transfers hamper assessment of performance. Competency and merit, and not just seniority, to be the criteria for higher central and state appointments and deputations. Adoption of annual targets and long-term plans to evaluate individual as well as departments' performance. Cues can be taken from the performance management systems deployed in the private sector. Job security, tangible and intangible perks and the net cost to government be quantified to promote transparency of information. Government officials often complain about low salaries as compared to the private sector. As suggested by the 7th CPC Chairman, Alaska III, the practice of CPC appointment should be replaced with a mechanism of differential pay for different performances reviewed periodically, emulating the productivity and outcome-based systems existent in Spain, Singapore, Germany, and other nations. Also, CPCs make several recommendations regarding posting, promotions, performance review, etc., which are cold-shouldered. Hence, adoption of their recommendations must be all-encompassing and not limited to salary and pension. 6. Highlight the salient features of National Electric Mobility Mission Plan (NEMP 2020). Analyze the major challenges in realizing the government's vision of 100% electric vehicles by 2030. Approach. Mention the salient features of National Electric Mobility Mission Plan (NEMP 2020). Highlight the main challenges in the path of realizing the government's vision of 100% electric vehicles by 2030. Also mention some of the necessary steps which need to be taken for the mission's success. Answer. The shift to electric mobility has become necessary on account of fast depletion of fossil fuels, rapid increase in energy costs, and concerns over climate change. In this context, the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan (NEMP 2020) was launched by the Government of India in 2013. It aims to ensure a vehicle population of about 6 to 7 million electric/hybrid vehicles by the year 2020, along with a certain level of indigenization of technology, ensuring India's global leadership in some vehicle segments. Salient features. The NEMP 2020 is a composite scheme that uses different demand-side and supply-side policy levers such as promotion of R&D in technology, fiscal and monetary incentives, production of Chevys, also called plug-in vehicles that are reliable, affordable and efficient, creation of charging infrastructure, encouragement of retrofitment of on-road vehicles with hybrid that leveraging synergies and avoiding duplication of efforts by different agencies, continued review, monitoring and course corrections. The plan envisages creation of dedicated institutions, see figure, to achieve its objectives. In pursuit of the mission, the government has also launched faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles in India scheme under NEMP 2020 to facilitate market creation of both hybrid and electric vehicles in the country. The government has set up a working group, which is evaluating the possibility of India making the transition to 100% electric vehicles by 2030 using a self-financing model, i.e. by monetizing savings accrued from petroleum products. Various challenges in realizing this vision include poor electric grid ecosystem and absence of ample charging station options, consumer non-acceptability due to low consumer awareness and current price performance gap, low levels of technology R&D leading to high costs of EVs, lithium-ion batteries, etc. Supply side constraints, low levels of manufacturing investments and non-existent supply chain. Inadequate funding, e.g. the government has allotted a meter sum of Rs. 10 crore 2015 to 16 and Rs. 20 crore 2016 to 17 towards charging infrastructure at public places. Efficiency issues. According to a CSTP study, EVs today provide lesser mileage compared to their counterparts that run non-conventional sources of energy. To overcome the above challenges and fulfill the government's vision, it is important to undertake supply and demand side measures like tax incentives, mandatory local procurement of Chevy components, innovative financing model, etc. to strengthen the Chevy ecosystem in India. 7. The directions given by the Supreme Court in the Prakash Singh case were aimed at reforming the police services in India. Comment. What have been the major impediments in implementing these reforms? Approach. Introduce your answer with a brief about the Prakash Singh case. Write about the recommendations of the case having the intention of reforming police services in India. Further, discuss the major issues which have proved to be roadblocks in implementation of these recommendations. Answer. In Prakash Singh v/S Union of India, 2006, the Supreme Court issued directives for police reform in light of various issues in the police system, viz. lack of transparency, ineffectiveness, and non-clarity in appointments and selection. The core directives seek to achieve two main objectives: functional autonomy for the police. Directives include constitution of a state security commission, to limit political control, to lay down broad policy guidelines, Go to evaluate the performance of the state police. Appointments based on merit. The Director General of Police to be appointed through a merit-based and transparent process. Fix minimum tenure. To ensure minimum tenure of 2 years to police officers on operational duties. Set up Police Establishment Board. To set up a Police Establishment Board, which will decide all transfers, postings, promotions and other service-related matters of police officers up and below the rank of DSP and make recommendations on postings and transfers of officers above the rank of DSP. National Security Commission to prepare a panel for selection and placement of chiefs of the Central Police Organization's CPO who should also be given a minimum tenure of 2 years. Enhanced police accountability. Here the directives include Police Complaints Authority, creation of a district and state-level police complaints authority to deal with complaints against the police. Separate police functions, separate the functions of investigation and that of maintaining law and order. These directives are intended to direct to redefine a role and functions of the police and frame a new police act in order to ensure that the police is made accountable essentially and primarily to law of the land and the people. However, there is a wide variation in implementation of these directives across the states. Major impediments include police being the state subject. Setting up a state security commission with binding powers is likely to undermine the power of a constitutionally established state government over the state police. Fixed 2-year tenure will block opportunities for other eligible senior officers. It also takes away the right of the government to transfer police officers to meet administrative exigencies. The Police Establishment Board may lead to creation of a separate power center, comprising bureaucrats who are not answerable to the people. Complaints authorities will duplicate existing efforts due to existing bodies like NHRC, CDC, etc. and be a financial burden. Lack of political will. Lack of public awareness. Police reforms are often unappealing to the common man. Lack of adequate resources, like low budget allocations. The crux of the police reform is to secure professional independence for the police to function truly and efficiently as an impartial agent of law of the land and, at the same time, to enable the government to oversee the police performance to ensure its conformity to law. Police reforms are much sought after for a vibrant democracy. The time has come to sensitize the general public and adapt good policing practices from all over the world. 8. Despite outlawing underage marriages, these are widespread across India. Explaining the reasons for the same, highlight the challenges that exist in their prevention. What can be done to address these challenges? Approach. Introduce with a brief overview on the prevalence of child marriages in India. Corroborate this with data. List the various constitutional, legal and policy instruments in place to put an end to this practice. Discuss the reasons behind the continuation of child marriage despite being outlawed and challenges to prevention of child marriage. Conclude with the way forward to deal with this menace. Answer. Despite being outlawed, child marriage is still an entrenched practice in India. The UNICEF study suggests that India has the highest burden of child brides in the world. The practice of underage marriage in India is continuing despite enactment of legislations, Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, 2006, Juvenile Justice Act, Protection of Children from Sexual Offenses Act, 2012, etc. Initiatives such as the National Plan of Action for Children, 2016 and National Policy for Children, 2013 for delaying the age of marriage. Participation in global initiatives like CEDAW, Convention on the Rights of the Child, UNFPA, etc. The objectives of the above well-intentioned steps are difficult to achieve due to patriarchy. Restrictive norms continue to limit girls to a role of daughter, wife, and mother. Poverty and marriage expenses such as dowry may lead a family to marry off their daughter at a young age to reduce these costs. Education and early marriage. Poor educational opportunities for girls, especially in rural areas. Social, community, and gender norms. Marriages arranged around the time of puberty to control girls' and women's sexual conduct. Challenges. Inadequate machinery, structure, and ineffective implementation could not translate provisions from documents to practice. There are gaps in programs and policies to ensure prevention of child marriages. For instance, programs and schemes for boys and girls are largely designed in silos. Lack of a feminist approach to lawmaking. For example, There is difference in marriageable age of boys and girls. Social pressure. There is pressure on parents to marry off their daughters as early as possible. Lack of awareness about penal provision regarding child marriage. Way forward. Developing state and district plans in locations with high incidence of child marriage. Provision for registration of marriages need to be made compulsory, simple and user-friendly. Provision of relevant economic support to poor families who are vulnerable to marrying off their girls early. Schemes like Buggy might need to be promoted. Strengthening the legal system and ensuring stringent enforcement of PCMA, 2006. Leveraging civil society groups by setting up watch groups, creating awareness, etc. Engaging the powerful community of religious leaders to change the attitude of communities where child marriage is prevalent. Preventing trafficking and acts of violence against the girl child, since these are correlated with child marriage. There is also need to pay attention and support young married girls, as they are extremely vulnerable and at high risk of physical and sexual violence. To completely eliminate the practice of child marriage, a clear direction and strategy needs to be developed on the basis of a comprehensive understanding of the issue. The change needs to be brought in through social engineering rather than by merely enacting law or making policies. 9. Highlight the issues associated with public healthcare infrastructure in India with special focus on acute shortage of manpower. Suggest some measures to address these issues. Approach. Briefly mention the constituents of the public healthcare infrastructure. Mention the infrastructural issues in healthcare sector, with emphasis on shortage of workforce manpower. Mention the steps taken by the government in this regard. In the last part, enlist some further possible solutions. Answer. A good healthcare infrastructure has many components: physical facilities that make care accessible, laboratory, training, and other support facilities, reliable supplies of pharmaceuticals and other materials, trained staff and professional training systems, and mechanisms to distribute resources and expertise to people who need them. Issues with healthcare infrastructure. Physical capacity. India has acute shortage of basic facilities, especially in rural areas. For example, there is one bed for every 10-50 patients. Issues related to medical colleges and education. Medical education has become more a commercial venture, focusing only on extracting huge profits. MCI recently barred 32 colleges due to substandards and ill practices. Issues with administrative and regulatory structure. Bodhal panel pointed out that MCI has not served its regulatory mandate well and suggested wide-ranging reforms. Acute shortage of healthcare workforce. It is clear by the following figures. India's ratio of 0.7 doctors and 1.5 nurses per 1,000 people is radically lower than the WHO's global average of 2.5 doctors and nurses per 1,000 people. So the shortfall of staff at the PHCs and CHCs is even more acute, as this shortfall is more than 75% across all streams of health professionals. Apart from acute shortage, following the issues are also associated with the workforce. Rural-urban disparity, has over 80% of the medical manpower works in urban and semi-urban areas. Questionable qualifications. As the Report 2016 Health Workforce in India stated, that 31% medical practitioners have only secondary level education and 57% hold no credentials at all. Measures taken. The government has already launched the Pradhan Mantri Swasthya Suraksha Yojana for the expansion of healthcare facilities. Central government has launched the National Health Policy, which seeks to increase public spending to 2.5% of GDP with a focus on enhancing the availability of health professionals. Government has launched National AYUSH Mission as a part of National Rural Health Mission to solve the problem of manpower shortage. Proposed NIVIA model of PPP-based private hospitals run select services within government hospitals with an aim to increase outreach and inclusiveness of health care. Way ahead. The expansion of government hospitals, etc. to improve bed-to-patient ratio. Restructuring of the MCI, as per the draft National Medical Commission bill that may replace the Indian Medical Council Act, 1956. Short-term courses for skilling of nurses, midwives, pharmacists, A&Ms who would work locally. Mandatory rural service at the PHCs/CHCs for the medical students. Common licentiate examination to ensure quality of doctors and other practitioners.